One of the most widely discussed issues in integral circles is that of hierarchies. Many think that one of the biggest advantages of integral theory is that it can reintegrate the idea of hierarchy and help people to become more functional, in the sense that they can reorient themselves around goals. They can start to revalue the world, or they can start valuing it again, setting priorities, and they can start getting things done again. And just as on this individual level, as a community, integral allows you to really get things done and orient yourself around specific goals and specific priorities, which is very difficult in green environment, where you have a flatland of opinions competing with each other, and where everyone has to be heard, and everyone's opinion is equally valid, equally legitimate, and equally important as everyone else's. But still, I think we haven't really figured it out in the details. We have a very vague notion of hierarchy, which is a cross-domain term as we use it, because on the one hand, it's a term that we apply on perception. Our perception is hierarchically structured. In other words, our actions, I'm sorry I'm using this in other words all the time, it's just the script I'm running. Our perception is hierarchically structured. We perceive not by observing details, but by having a general orientation, having a general sense of what we are looking at. And from that general orientation, we can then zoom in into the details. And depending on what your professional background is, you will, of course, in the very same moment of perception, experience very different details depending on your training and your ability to focus and guide your attention. You can take any area, like music, for example. Someone who is a novice and who has not been trained in music will not be able to hear the same details, even though it's not like those who have a trained inner ear hear more, in the sense of having more auditory input. They don't. They have the same auditory input as every one of us has. Their hearing might even have been degrading over the years. Like, take the example of Beethoven, who was, I think, almost deaf or even deaf and at the very end of his life, and yet the differentiation of musical form of which they're capable is basically an expression of their mental ability to prioritize and to hierarchize, to create inner hierarchies of perception. If you had no inner form of hierarchy, everything would be within your own perception equally important as everything else. The result of which, of course, is chaos. The result is not perception, but the result is being lost in a flow of meaningless, basically, single individual experiences. And this is an area where you could apply the notion of hierarchy, just as hierarchy is a notion that, of course, we usually apply to the political sphere, where people are in power and other people follow those who are in charge. But I think we have to really differentiate the notion, and I've not really seen anyone do this in integral, because to me it's really not obvious that just because someone in a specific context has fleshed out to be the competent other, has proven himself or herself to be a natural authority, I think was the word, someone who is naturally more competent than somebody else in a specific area. For me, from this, it doesn't follow that, when we're speaking of inner hierarchy, one of the examples that Ken is, for example, using is that when your dog decides to go over there and play, the entire dog goes with all of its molecules, including its tail. This is the idea that the higher is able to guide the lower, to give the lower its direction. But it's evident that we cannot apply this one-to-one to social reality. Who, for example, in what way is it convincing that someone who has proven himself to be more competent in the specific area, therefore, in a way, decides everything in every minuscule detail and owns everything in every minuscule detail. Because this is the way we have usually been interpreting hierarchy in the past. Those who were at the top of the hierarchy were basically at the top of everything. They decided everything and they owned everything and they had access to everything. It was not differentiated whether in some areas it would still make more sense for others, for example, to make decisions. Whether, for example, some decisions couldn't be taken always as a community, whereas in other areas it makes sense to have someone being responsible for a specific development, for a specific task, and others follow them. But to me it's not obvious why, for example, those who are on the top of the hierarchy at the same time should be also those who decide, for example, who is getting paid how much. I don't see the logical connection here. I mean, I see that we have been doing this in the past, but I couldn't really argue it. And we really need a very refined notion of hierarchy. But hierarchies we need, in any case, because without hierarchies, just as you can't perceive without a hierarchical structuring of your own perception, just in the same way you cannot act as a group if you don't have some form of hierarchies in specific domains. And fleshing that out, I think, will be a very interesting challenge. And we can also use, again, we can use new means to create hierarchies, including, of course, new media. Again, as an example, we can use new strategies that are being developed in organizational development, for example. And we can make communication flow also. This is something that's connected to my past point, which was about how difficult it is to get complex ideas across. We can create communication flow between the top and the bottom, however you define top and bottom now, because I think this is something that has not been working in Integral, and I've often heard people complain about it, that there is no bottom-up communication in Integral, basically. All we're left with is the comments that you can actually make in diverse forums, but many people simply feel unheard and having no ability to really express their own views and needs. And it's not like all of their views are important or relevant for the community as a whole, and all of their needs are, but some of them are. And from just talking to people, I've had the impression, from just personal interaction, I've had the impression that many issues that are important to many of us have never really been voiced in a public space, let alone have ever really reached the top of those who basically are in charge of the discourse and make the decisions where the discourse is going and what is being taken in, what is being integrated, and what is being left out. And I don't think it's a very smart move to make, to put the burden on those who are leading the discourse, to make the decision of what to integrate and what to leave out, which voices to integrate and which voices to leave out. I think this, for example, is not really a very good, this is not something that hierarchies are really, really good at doing, because this puts too much pressure on those at the top, and this is an expectation that they can't really live up to, even if they want it, because it would actually mean that they would have to get acquainted with the entirety of those at the bottom and filter that which is really relevant and make it float to the top. And I don't think it will work in this manual fashion. I mean, Wilber's been trying to do this. I mean, his approach is basically, he's doing it by reading everyone. And this is his way of paying attention. As a friend of mine recently said, he might not be able to listen to you in person, but he's able to read. And it's through reading that he takes in all these contributions that are spread all across the disciplines, and he's making them float up to the top and make them more visible. It is a part of the whole thing, but I don't think this is the only strategy that we can use to filter the individual contributions that really deserve more attention within a community as a whole. And we have to come up with really smart solutions to this one, and how to combine hierarchies with this function of integrating that which will get us further in our collective, on our collective path.